The day I found out my childhood home was gone, I was sitting in a high-rise office in downtown Atlanta, finalizing a deal that would change the landscape of commercial real estate in the Southeast. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, a message so casual it felt like a slap. Cleaning out the attic. Found your old dance trophies. Do you want them? Or should we toss them? I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the keyboard. The house on Maple Street, the one with the wraparound porch and the magnolia tree my father planted when I was born, had been sold 3 months prior. I hadn't been told. I found out from a real estate alert on my own damn phone, a notification meant for market analysis, not personal devastation. My parents, Daniel and Estelle Vance, had sold the only stable home I'd ever known to a luxury developer who planned to bulldoze it for a new golf course. They hadn't called. They hadn't asked. They simply cashed the check and moved on, treating 40 years of family history like a tax write-off. My name is Kira Vance, and at 31 years old, I am the founder and CEO of Vance Capital Holdings, a private equity firm that specializes in acquiring and revitalizing distressed luxury assets. I wore suits tailored in Milan, managed a portfolio worth over $400 million, and had a black card with no limit. But to my parents, I was still the sensible one. The middle child who didn't make a fuss, who paid her bills, who was good with numbers. My older brother, Bradley, was the golden heir, a failed restaurateur whose ego was subsidized by our parents. My younger sister, Chloe, was the princess, whose entire personality was curated for Instagram, funded by a seemingly endless allowance. I was the invisible engine, the one they called when the numbers didn't add up, but whose opinion they never actually valued. I drove to the old neighborhood that evening, not in my usual Porsche, but in an unmarked rental car. I wanted to see it one last time. As I turned onto Maple Street, my heart seized. The house was already gone. In its place was a fenced-off construction site, a massive pit where my backyard used to be. The magnolia tree, the one I'd climbed 1,000 times, was a stump. A banner stretched across the fence, displaying a rendering of the future. The Estelle, a gated community with a signature golf course, named after my mother. They had named a golf course after her, using the money from selling the house where she'd raised me. I sat in the car for a long time, the engine off, the only sound the distant hum of the highway. I wasn't sad. I was cold. A precise, focused cold settled in my chest, a feeling I recognized from boardrooms when a competitor underestimated me. They had made a decision that erased a part of my history. Now, I would make a decision that would redefine theirs. I didn't confront them. I didn't call. I went back to my penthouse, a place they'd never seen, and spent the night on my computer. I wasn't looking at family photos. I was dissecting a corporate structure. The developer behind the Estelle was Sterling Land Holdings, a publicly traded company with a stock price that had been stagnant for 2 years. They were over-leveraged, stretched thin by a portfolio of half-finished projects. The golf course was their Hail Mary, a bet on luxury living in a market that was already saturated. It was a risky venture, one they couldn't afford to fail. And I, with my access to capital and my network of high-stakes investors, was in the perfect position to make sure it did fail, or rather, to make sure I was the one holding the ball when it dropped. The next morning, I called my father. He answered on the second ring, his voice booming with the same false cheer he used with clients. Kira, to what do we owe the pleasure? Your mother said you never returned her text about the trophies. You know we're very busy with the new chapter. I saw the banner. Dad, I said, my voice level. The Estelle. You named day. Golf course after mom. There was a pause, a beat of silence where he calculated his response. It's a tribute, sweetheart. A legacy. We've spent our lives building for you kids. This is the culmination. You should be proud. Maybe now you can finally understand what it takes to create something of value. I understand, I said. I understand completely. I hung up before he could respond. He thought I was jealous. He thought I was a bitter daughter who couldn't see the big picture. He was wrong. I was an investor who saw a weakness, a predator who had just identified the prey. For the next 3 weeks, I worked in the shadows. I didn't use my own name. I used a shell company I'd established years ago for sensitive acquisitions, a ghost in the machine. I began buying up the debt of Sterling Land Holdings, quietly, through brokers who didn't know who the ultimate buyer was. I reached out to the major shareholders, the ones who were growing restless with the stagnant stock, and started whispering about a new vision, a more profitable direction. I didn't talk about the golf course. I talked about liquidity, about restructuring, about the immense value locked in their prime, underutilized real estate. I was building a coalition, a silent army of investors who wanted the same thing I did, a change in leadership. My family, of course, was oblivious. Bradley was trying to launch a new restaurant concept, a gastropub that was destined to fail. Chloe was planning a destination wedding in Santorini, the cost of which she assumed our parents would cover. And my parents were strutting around the country club, the very one they were about to expand, as if they were the king and queen of a world they were about to lose. They had no idea that the quiet, sensible daughter, the one they dismissed for years, was about to become the sole owner of the kingdom they were so desperate to build. The game was set. The pieces were in motion. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment to strike. The country club where my parents spent most of their waking hours was called The Haven. It was an old money institution, a sprawling estate of manicured lawns, clay tennis courts, and a grand colonial clubhouse that had been the center of Atlanta's high society for over a century. My father, Daniel, had spent the better part of his retirement trying to get on the board of governors. My mother, Estelle, chaired the annual charity gala, a position she treated with the gravity of a cabinet secretary. The Haven was their altar, their identity, their proof that they had made it. The new development, the Estelle, was supposed to be the crown jewel of their legacy, a state-of-the-art golf course that would cement their status and, more importantly, keep them relevant in a social circle that was increasingly run by new money and younger names. I watched them from a distance, a silent observer. I had my own membership, of course, under a pseudonym, a perk of my business dealings. I'd use it to have quiet meetings in the cigar lounge or to close deals over lunch in the private dining room. My parents had no idea I was ever there. To them, I was still the daughter who drove a sensible sedan and lived in a modest condo. The penthouse, the Porsche, the private jet, these were facets of a life I had deliberately kept hidden, not from shame, but from strategy. Their underestimation was my greatest asset. The week before the final shareholder vote for Sterling Land Holdings, my mother called. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was in my office, reviewing a dossier on the Sterling board members. Her voice was dripping with an excitement that was almost nauseating. "Kiera, we're having a small celebration at the club on Saturday. A pre-opening event for the course. Your father is giving a speech. It's going to be a very important night for the family. We'd like you to come." "A celebration?" I asked, my eyes scanning the financials in front of me. "For a hole in the ground and a banner?" My mother's voice tightened. "It's called vision, Kiera. Something you've never quite understood. We're building a legacy. Bradley will be there, and Chloe is flying in. It would look strange if you weren't there. People will talk." "People always talk, Mother," I said. "I'll try to make an appearance." I had no intention of making an appearance as their quiet, forgotten daughter. But I had every intention of being at the Haven on Saturday night. I RSVP'd with a +1, a detail I let slip without explanation. Saturday arrived, a crisp autumn evening perfect for an outdoor gala. Tents were erected on the lawn, string lights were draped from the magnolia trees, and a jazz trio played softly near the veranda. It was the kind of event my parents lived for, a beautiful illusion of prosperity and family unity. I arrived just as the speeches were about to begin. But I didn't walk in through the main gate. I walked through the clubhouse entrance, the one reserved for members. I was wearing a gown of deep emerald silk, a stark contrast to the muted pastels and navy suits of the other guests. I wasn't trying to blend in. I was making an entrance. I spotted my family near the stage. My father was at the podium, adjusting the microphone, his chest puffed with self-importance. My mother was in the front row, beaming at a table of their closest friends. Bradley was at the bar, already on his third whiskey, and Chloe was posing for photos, her back to the stage, more interested in her own content than her father's speech. I stood at the back of the crowd, a glass of champagne in my hand, watching the performance unfold. My father began his speech, his voice echoing across the lawn. He spoke of legacy, of sacrifice, of building something that would outlast them. He talked about the vision behind the Estelle, a project he said was for the future of our family and our community. He gestured to the banner behind him, the rendering of the pristine golf course that now sat atop the ruins of my childhood home. As he spoke, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my broker. Deed transfer is complete. Sterling is yours. You now hold 51% of the shares. The board is yours to command. I smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of my lips. My father finished his speech to a round of polite applause, and my mother rushed to the stage to kiss his cheek, a perfect picture of support. It was then that I began to move. I didn't rush. I walked through the crowd, my heels making a soft, rhythmic click on the stone pathway. People turned to look, some with curiosity, others with recognition. I was, after all, a Vance, even if I was the one they never talked about. I reached the edge of the stage just as my father was stepping down. He saw me, his eyes flickering with surprise, then settling into a familiar, condescending warmth. "Kira, you made it. I was starting to think you'd miss the party." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Quite a night, isn't it? Your mother has outdone herself." I didn't return his smile. "It's quite a night, Dad," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden lull of conversation around us. I wanted to offer my congratulations in person. My mother approached, her smile brittle. "Well, it's about time you showed up. We have you seated at the back, near the caterers. I hope that's all right." "It won't be necessary, Mother," I said, turning to face the crowd. My father's hand was on my arm, a gentle but insistent pressure. "Kira, let's not make a scene." I pulled my arm away and walked up the steps to the stage. The crowd murmured, confused. My father's voice rose behind me, sharp with alarm. "Kira, what are you doing?" I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. I saw my mother's face contort from confusion to horror. I saw Bradley's whiskey glass freeze halfway to his mouth. I saw Chloe's phone slowly lower, her eyes wide. I saw the board members from Sterling Land Holdings, seated at a table near the front, recognizing me for what I was. I tapped the microphone. "Good evening. My name is Kira Vance. Some of you know me as Daniel and Estelle's daughter. The sensible one. The one who didn't make a fuss." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "I'm here tonight to offer my own congratulations to Sterling Land Holdings and to the Board of Governors of the Haven on a successful evening. I'm also here to announce a change in ownership." I looked directly at my father, whose face was now a mask of ashen shock. "As of 7 p.m. this evening, Vance Capital Holdings has acquired a controlling interest in Sterling Land Holdings. I am now the majority shareholder." The gasp that rippled through the crowd was audible. My mother clutched my father's arm, her knuckles white. Bradley dropped his glass. "What this means," I continued, my voice steady, "is that the future of the Estelle project, and, by extension, the Haven Country Club's expansion plans, are now my decision. I have reviewed the proposals, the financials, and the projections. And I have decided that the golf course, as it stands, is not a viable investment." My father took a step towards the stage, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Kira, stop. You don't understand what you're doing." I met his eyes. "I understand perfectly, Dad. I understand that you sold the house I grew up in, the house where my grandmother died, to finance this vanity project. You didn't tell me. You didn't even think to ask. So now, I'm making my own decision." I looked back at the crowd. "The golf course will not be built. The land will be preserved. I'm converting it into a public park. A green space. For the community." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "It will be named Kira's Grove. I think it has a nice ring to it, don't you?" The silence that followed my announcement was the kind that only exists in moments of absolute, catastrophic shock. It wasn't the polite silence of an audience waiting for the next speaker. It was the stunned, breathless quiet of a bomb that has just detonated. My mother's face, usually so carefully composed, was a canvas of pure, unfiltered rage and humiliation. My father stood frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the stage as if the ground were about to give way beneath him. Bradley was already on his phone, probably calling his lawyer or his bookie, and Chloe was filming, her influencer instincts overriding any sense of family loyalty. I didn't wait for the questions or the accusations. I stepped down from the stage, my emerald gown sweeping against the wood, and walked back through the crowd. People parted for me, some with looks of awe, others with barely concealed glee at the social carnage unfolding before them. I could feel my father's eyes on my back, burning with a fury he couldn't express without confirming everything I'd just said. I walked straight to the clubhouse, past the bar where Bradley was now arguing loudly with the manager about the cost of the broken glass, and into the private dining room. I had one more meeting that night, and it wasn't with my family. Inside, 3 men were waiting for me. They were the senior members of the Haven's Board of Governors, men in their 70s and 80s who had run the club with an iron fist for decades. They had been watching my father's speech from the window, and they had heard mine. They were no longer looking at me as the forgotten Vance daughter. They were looking at me as the woman who now held the keys to their kingdom. Miss Vance, the oldest of them, retired judge named Harold Pemberton, said, rising from his chair. That was quite an entrance. I took a seat at the head of the table, the chair my father would have given a kidney to occupy. It was a necessary correction, Judge Pemberton. My parents are accustomed to making decisions without consulting the people they affect. I simply returned the favor. The men exchanged glances. The second man, a real estate developer named Arthur Crane, cleared his throat. Your acquisition of Sterling, it was a hostile takeover. You've essentially held a gun to the head of this club's expansion plans. I've held a gun to the head of a bad investment. I corrected him. Sterling was overleveraged. They were one bad quarter from bankruptcy. The golf course was a desperate attempt to inflate their stock price. It was never a sound business decision. It was a vanity project, funded by my father's ego and my mother's need for social validation. I slid a folder across the polished mahogany table. These are my proposals. I own the land. I own the development rights. The golf course will not be built. But I'm not here to destroy the Haven. I'm here to save it. The third man, a silver-haired banker named William Cross, opened the folder. His eyes scanned the pages, his expression shifting from skepticism to something that looked like respect. You're offering to purchase the club's debt. All of it. I'm offering to recapitalize the club, I said. Your membership is aging. Your facilities are outdated. You've been surviving on legacy and inertia for 20 years. I'm proposing a complete overhaul. New tennis courts, a state-of-the-art fitness center, a redesigned clubhouse that honors the history but embraces the future. I'm offering to turn this place into a destination again, not just a relic. Judge Pemberton leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin. And your parents? Your father has spent years trying to get on this board. He's been vocal about his ambitions. I allowed a thin smile. My father's ambitions are no longer relevant to this conversation. The board seats for this new entity will be filled by professionals, by people with expertise in hospitality and finance, not by people whose primary qualification is a desire to impress their friends. I stood up, signaling that my part of the meeting was over. I'll give you gentlemen a week to review the proposal. If you're not interested, I'll take my offer to the other private clubs in Atlanta. There are plenty that would welcome the capital and the vision. I left them sitting there, the folder open on the table, their world quietly shifting on its axis. I walked out of the clubhouse, past the remnants of the gala that was now in full meltdown mode. My mother was in the corner, sobbing into a napkin while a cluster of her friends pretended not to see. My father was arguing with the event coordinator, trying to get the bar tab comped. Bradley had disappeared, probably to drown his shame in a dive bar. And Chloe was live on Instagram, her face a mask of faux concern as she narrated the family drama to her followers. I walked past them all, my car keys in my hand, feeling lighter than I had in years. As I reached my car, a black Mercedes with tinted windows that was parked in the VIP section, I heard my father's voice behind me. Kira. He was jogging across the lawn, his bow tie undone, his face flushed with alcohol and fury. Kira, stop. I turned, leaning against the door of my car. He reached me, out of breath, his eyes wild. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You've humiliated us. In front of everyone. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I have a very clear idea," I said. "I've protected a piece of land that meant something to me. I've exposed a bad business deal. And I've reminded you that I'm not the quiet, invisible daughter you've always assumed I was." He pointed a trembling finger at my face. "You're a traitor. To this family. You've taken everything we worked for and you've twisted it." "No, Dad," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You took everything. You took the house. You took the memories. You took the only place that ever felt like home, and you sold it for a tax write-off and a golf course. I'm just showing you what it feels like to have something taken from you without a conversation." I opened my car door. "Good night, Dad. I'll see you around." I got in, started the engine, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing alone on the manicured lawn, the string lights of the ruined gala twinkling behind him, a man who had just realized that the world he thought he controlled was, in fact, completely beyond his grasp. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel sorry for any of them. I felt the cold, clean satisfaction of a long-overdue balance being restored. The fallout from that night was swift and merciless, exactly as I had anticipated. By Sunday morning, my phone was a war zone. My mother had left a series of voicemails that escalated from hysterical weeping to cold, venomous accusations. Bradley sent a text so vulgar I deleted it without finishing. Chloe, ever the opportunist, had posted a carefully curated TikTok about toxic family dynamics that managed to garner sympathy for herself while subtly implying I was the villain. I ignored them all. I had work to do. The board of the Haven called me on Monday, not a week later as I'd suggested, but first thing in the morning. Judge Pemberton's voice was clipped, the tone of a man who was used to being in control and didn't like the feeling of having it stripped away. "Your proposal, Miss Vance. We've discussed it. Your terms are aggressive." "My terms are fair, Judge," I replied, my voice calm as I looked out over the Atlanta skyline from my corner office. "The club is hemorrhaging money. Your options are to accept my recapitalization plan, watch the membership continue to age out and the facilities continue to decay, or try to find another investor willing to take on the debt." I know for a fact there aren't any. There was a long pause. I could picture the three of them in the wood-paneled boardroom, the tension thick enough to carve. Finally, Arthur Crane's voice came on the line. "We'll accept on one condition. We'd like you to sit on the new board. Not as an investor, but as a member. We need someone with your perspective." I smiled to myself. They were shrewd old foxes. They knew they were beaten, but they wanted to co-opt me, to make me part of the old boys club rather than an outsider threatening it. "I'll accept a seat on the board," I said, on the condition that the board's composition is expanded to include younger members, women, and people of color. This club has been a monument to exclusivity for too long. It's time it started looking like the city it's in. Another pause. Then, Harold Pemberton's reluctant sigh. "We'll put together a committee to discuss it." "You'll put together a committee to implement it," I corrected him. "I'll send over the names of potential candidates by the end of the week." I hung up before they could argue. The next few weeks were a blur of legal documents, construction permits, and board meetings. I hired a top-tier landscape architecture firm to design Kira's Grove, a public park that would honor the land's history while making it accessible to everyone, not just the members of a private club. I commissioned a memorial garden in the spot where the magnolia tree used to stand, a quiet, contemplative space where people could sit and reflect. I wasn't erasing the past, I was recontextualizing it, turning a symbol of my family's greed into a gift for the community they had so long ignored. My parents, of course, were not taking it well. My mother had been quietly uninvited from the charity gala she had chaired for years. Her name was removed from the donor wall at the hospital. Her friends, the same ones who had smiled and nodded at her stories of the golf course, suddenly found other engagements. My father's quest for a seat on the club's board was over before it began. He was now a cautionary tale, the man who had overreached and been humbled by his own daughter. Bradley's gastropub, which he had been using the promise of his family's new wealth to finance, had its funding pulled. The investors vanished overnight. He was left with nothing but a lease on a commercial kitchen and a mountain of debt. It was Chloe who finally broke the silence. A month after the gala, she showed up at my office. She looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of the Instagram-filtered glow. She stood in my doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes darting around the sleek, minimalist space like a mouse that had wandered into a hawk's nest. "This is where you work?" she asked, her voice a mixture of awe and accusation. "This is where you've been hiding?" "I haven't been hiding, Chloe," I said, gesturing for her to sit. "I've been working. You just never bothered to look." She sat, twisting her designer handbag in her lap. "Mom is a mess. She won't leave the house. Dad is drinking. Bradley is. Bradley, you've destroyed them." "I've destroyed a fantasy," I said, leaning back in my chair. "The one where they could sell our history for a status symbol and no one would hold them accountable. They did this, Chloe. Not me." She was quiet for a moment. Then, to my surprise, a single tear slipped down her cheek. "They cut me off. Dad says I have to get a real job." "A real job, Kira." "I've never had a real job." I felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. "Then I guess you're about to start." I pulled a folder from my desk. "I have a position open in my marketing department. It's entry-level. It pays a fraction of what you're used to spending on handbags. But it's a start." She looked at the folder, then at me, her eyes wide. "You'd hire me? After everything?" "I'd give you a chance," I said. "What you do with it is up to you. But if you work for me, you work for me. No special treatment. No calling me for money on the side. And no more posts about our toxic family on social media." She nodded slowly, a mix of defiance and desperation in her eyes. She took the folder. "Okay." After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, looking at the photo on my desk, the one of me, at 10 years old, standing in front of the magnolia tree on Maple Street, my hair in pigtails, my smile wide and unburdened. I had given Chloe a chance because I remembered what it felt like to be the one who was dismissed, the one who was never taken seriously. But I also knew that this was her test, not mine. I had passed mine the night I stood on that stage and told the truth. The rest was up to her. The transformation of the old Sterling Landholdings property into Kira's Grove became a public spectacle, and not the kind my parents had envisioned. Where they had seen a golf course, a symbol of exclusive leisure, the city saw a green oasis, a long overdue correction to decades of development that had prioritized private wealth over public good. The media, which had initially framed the story as a family feud for the ages, slowly began to shift its narrative. Headlines like "Daughter's Revenge Becomes City's Reward" and "From Golf Course to Green Space," the unlikely legacy of Kira's Grove, started popping up. I was no longer the villain who had humiliated her parents. I was the unlikely hero who had given the city a park. I attended the groundbreaking ceremony on a crisp Saturday in March. The site, once a fenced-off construction pit, was now a staging area for earth movers and surveyors. A small crowd had gathered, local officials, representatives from the Parks Department, a few journalists, and a surprising number of residents from the surrounding neighborhoods who had come to see the beginning of something new. I stood near the podium, wearing a simple navy coat and work boots, a stark contrast to the emerald gown I'd worn to the gala. This wasn't a performance. This was work. The mayor, a pragmatic woman named Helen Okonkwo, who had been fighting for more green space in the city for years, gave a short speech. She talked about the importance of public land, about the legacy of a city that chose parks over parking lots, community over exclusivity. Then she introduced me. "Kira Vance didn't just buy a piece of land," she said, her voice carrying over the low hum of the crowd. "She bought back a piece of our city's soul. And she chose to share it with all of us." I walked to the podium, the gold-plated shovel for the ceremonial first turn of dirt gleaming in the sunlight. I looked out at the faces in the crowd. I saw the woman from the corner store who had watched me grow up. I saw the kids from the apartment complex across the street, their faces lit with the possibility of a new place to play. I saw my sister, Chloe, standing at the back, a notebook in her hand, taking notes for her new job. I did not see my parents. I did not see my brother. They were not there, and I was not looking for them. I'm not here to talk about my family, I began, my voice steady. I'm here to talk about this land. For 40 years, this was my home. It was the place where I learned to ride a bike, where my grandmother taught me to plant tomatoes, where I first understood what it meant to belong to something. When that home was taken, I was angry. But anger is a terrible foundation for building anything that lasts. I paused, letting my eyes sweep the crowd. So I decided to build something different. Something that couldn't be owned by one person or one family. Something that belongs to everyone. Heroes Grove isn't about me. It's about the idea that a city's greatest asset isn't its golf courses or its gated communities. It's its shared spaces. Its parks. Its playgrounds. It's places where anyone, no matter their background, can come to breathe, to play, to be. I picked up the shovel. This ground has been a construction site, a family's backyard, a source of conflict and pain. Today, it becomes a park. I plunged the shovel into the soft earth. The crowd applauded, not the polite, restrained applause of a club gala, but the genuine, enthusiastic clapping of people who felt like they were witnessing something real. After the ceremony, I stayed for hours, talking to neighbors, shaking hands with the construction foreman, walking the perimeter of the site. I pointed out where the magnolia tree used to be, where the memorial garden would go, where the playground would be built. I was tired, but it was a good tired, the kind that comes from using your strength for something that matters. As the sun began to set, I found Chloe sitting on a low stone wall, her notebook full of sketches and ideas for the park's opening day event. "You were good out there," she said, without looking at me. "It wasn't a performance," I said, sitting beside her. "I know," she said. She was quiet for a moment. "Dad called me. He wants me to ask you for money. He says the bank is threatening to take the house. The new house, the one they bought with the money from Maple Street." I looked out at the site, at the earth movers now still in the fading light. "They made their choice, Chloe. They chose a status symbol over a home. They can't come to me now because that status symbol turned out to be fool's gold." "I know," she said again, her voice small. I told him no. I turned to look at her. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set. It was the first time I had ever seen her look like an adult. "That must have been hard." "It was," she admitted. "But you gave me a chance. A real one. I'm not going to blow it by being their messenger." She stood up, brushing the dirt off her jeans. "I have to go. I have a report to finish for the marketing meeting on Monday." I watched her walk away, her back straight, her step sure. Maybe she would make it. Maybe she would become something more than the girl who posted for likes. And maybe she wouldn't. But for the first time, the choice was hers. I stayed on the stone wall until the light was almost gone, the silhouette of the construction equipment like sleeping giants against the darkening sky. I thought about my father, alone in the house he had bought with the money from Maple Street, a house he was now losing. I thought about my mother, hiding from the friends who had abandoned her. I thought about Bradley, drowning in debt he had created for himself. And I felt something that surprised me. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was a quiet, profound relief. The weight I had been carrying, the invisible burden of being the one who was never seen, had finally been lifted. I had built my own legacy, not from their approval, but from their dismissal. And it was, I realized, more than enough. The construction of Kira's Grove became a daily meditation for me. I visited the site every morning before going to my office, watching the transformation inch forward. The architects had preserved the foundation of the old house, not as a structure, but as a sunken garden, a quiet hollow where the original footprint could still be traced. The magnolia stump had been carved into a bench by a local artist, a place for reflection nestled among new plantings. The rest of the land was being sculpted into gentle hills, winding paths, and open meadows. It was a deliberate, painstaking process, a slow turning of pain into purpose. My father, meanwhile, was in freefall. The bank foreclosed on the new house. He and my mother moved into a small, two-bedroom condo in a complex on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place they would have driven past without a second glance just a year before. My mother's calls to me, which had started as furious accusations, had morphed into tearful pleas, and then, finally, into a brittle, angry silence. My father had stopped calling altogether. I heard through the grapevine that he had taken a job as a part-time consultant for a construction company, a role he considered beneath him, but one he couldn't afford to refuse. Bradley's fall was even more spectacular. His creditors caught up with him. The lease on the commercial kitchen was terminated. He declared bankruptcy, a public record that was gleefully reported by a local business blog. He moved in with a girlfriend no one in the family had ever met, and my mother refused to speak his name. Chloe, to her credit, kept her head down and worked. She was learning, slowly, that a paycheck earned was more satisfying than an allowance given. She had even started contributing to the park's marketing plan, suggesting a community day with free yoga classes and a farmer's market. I approved it. It was a good idea. The day the park opened was a perfect spring afternoon. The sky was a clear, soft blue, and the new grass was a vibrant, hopeful green. Thousands of people came. Families with strollers, elderly couples holding hands, teenagers on skateboards, children running through the meadows with kites trailing behind them. The memorial garden, with its bench carved from the old magnolia stump, was always occupied, a quiet spot in the midst of the joyful chaos. I stood on a small rise near the entrance, watching the scene unfold. I was not on the program. I had declined the mayor's offer to speak. This day was not about me. It was about the park, about the community, about the idea that something broken could be made whole. Chloe was down near the main stage, directing a team of volunteers who were handing out maps and park guides. She was good at it, I realized. She had found a way to use her skills, her ability to organize, to promote, to make things look appealing for something that mattered. I was about to walk down and join the crowd when I saw them. My parents. They were standing at the edge of the park, near the entrance that used to be the driveway to the old house. They looked small, diminished. My father was in a worn jacket, his shoulders slumped. My mother was in a simple dress, her hair pulled back without the usual styling. They were looking at the park, at the crowds of people, at the children playing on the grass where their backyard used to be. They didn't see me. For a long moment, I just watched them. I could see the conflict on their faces, the struggle between the old pride and the new reality. I saw my father's hand reach for my mother's, a gesture of shared loss. I saw my mother hesitate, then take it. They stood there, two people who had spent their lives chasing status, finally confronted with the thing they had sold. I walked down the rise, not towards them, but towards the main path that led into the park. I passed close enough that they could see me. My mother's eyes widened. My father stiffened. I didn't stop. I didn't say a word. I just walked past them, into the park, into the crowd. I heard my father's voice, a rough whisper, behind me. Kira. I paused. I turned. He looked lost, his face a map of regret and confusion. My mother was staring at the ground, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. It's a nice park, he said, the words seeming to cost him a great deal. It's a public park, I said. It belongs to everyone. He nodded slowly. My mother finally looked up. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something there that I hadn't seen in years. Not love, exactly, but a flicker of recognition. She saw me. Not the daughter who was supposed to make them look good, not the quiet one who paid the bills, but me, the woman who had built a park on the ruins of their ambition. It's beautiful, she said, her voice barely audible. I looked at them, standing there at the edge of the new grass, and I felt the last of my anger drain away. It didn't leave me empty. It left me light. You should see the memorial garden, I said. It's where the magnolia tree used to be. I turned and walked away, not waiting for a response. I didn't need one. I had given them a doorway, a chance to come in. Whether they walked through it was their choice, not mine. I had my own path to walk now, a path that led through a park I had built, a community I had helped create, a life I had chosen. A year passed. Kira's Grove was no longer news. It was simply there, a part of the city's fabric, as natural and necessary as the library or the post office. The early morning joggers knew its paths by heart. The weekend farmers market was a bustling institution. The memorial garden, with its magnolia bench, had become a place of quiet pilgrimage for people who needed a moment to sit and remember. I visited often, but I was no longer its caretaker. I was just another person enjoying the gift of open space. My business, Vance Capital Holdings, had flourished. The acquisition of Sterling Land Holdings had been a masterstroke, a move that was now taught in business schools as a case study in hostile takeovers. But I was ready for a new challenge. I had been thinking about legacy, about what it meant to build something that outlasts you. A park was one kind of legacy. A company was another. But I wanted something more, something that combined the two. Chloe had become a valuable member of my team. She had a knack for branding, for telling stories in a way that resonated with people. She had helped rebrand a struggling community bank, turning it into a pillar of the local business community. She had organized a citywide arts festival that had drawn thousands of people to Kira's Grove. She had grown up, in other words. She was no longer the princess on Instagram. She was a professional, a woman who had learned that the most satisfying likes were the ones you earned. One afternoon, she came into my office with a proposal. "I've been thinking about Dad," she said, without preamble. She sat down across from me, her posture straight, her eyes clear. "He's still at that construction company. He hates it, but he's good at it. He knows the industry. He knows the people." I waited. She wasn't asking for a handout. I could see that in her face. "I want to start a foundation," she said. "A nonprofit that focuses on building affordable housing in the neighborhoods around the park." Dad could consult. He could use his connections, his knowledge, for something that actually matters. Something that builds instead of just showing off. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. This was not the Chloe I had known. This was someone new. "And what about Mom?" I asked. Chloe smiled, a little wryly. "She's already volunteered to run the foundation's annual gala. She's good at galas. And this time, the money would actually go to something real." I thought about it. A foundation, named after the park, focused on the community that had grown up around it. My father, using his skills to build homes instead of monuments to his own ego. My mother, using her talent for social events to raise money for people who actually needed it. It was a strange, unexpected path, but maybe it was the only one that made sense. "I'll fund the startup costs," I said. "A seed grant. But the foundation has to be independent. It has to raise its own money, build its own reputation. I'm not going to be its safety net." Chloe nodded. "That's fair." She stood up, her hand on the door. "I know you don't owe them anything. I know they made their choices. But this isn't about them, really. It's about the park. It's about making sure the neighborhood doesn't get pushed out as the park makes it more desirable. It's about building something that lasts." She left. I sat in my office, looking at the skyline, at the city that had been my battleground and my salvation. She was right. This wasn't about my parents. It was about the idea that even the most broken things can be rebuilt, that even the most selfish people can, if given the chance, contribute to something larger than themselves. I had given Chloe a chance, and she had become someone I could respect. Maybe, just maybe, my parents could do the same. Or maybe they couldn't. But the foundation would succeed or fail on its own merits, not on their redemption. The next morning, I went for my usual walk in Kira's Grove. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The park was quiet, the only sounds the birds and the soft rustle of leaves. I walked to the memorial garden and sat on the magnolia bench. I looked at the spot where the house used to be, the sunken garden now a profusion of wildflowers and ferns. I thought about the little girl with the pigtails, the one who had climbed that tree and dreamed of a future she couldn't yet imagine. I had become that future, not through their help, but despite their neglect. And now I had the chance to help build a future for others, a future where a park wasn't a consolation prize, but a starting point. I stayed on the bench for a long time, until the sun was fully up and the first joggers began to appear on the paths. Then I stood up and walked back to my life, ready for the next chapter. The foundation would be Chloe's project. The park was the city's. My business was thriving. And I, Kira Vance, the daughter who had been invisible, had finally become visible on my own terms. The rest, as they say, was just the rest. The founding of the Grove Foundation was announced at a small ceremony in Kira's Grove just a few weeks later. The mayor was there. The heads of several local community organizations were there. A few journalists, curious about this new chapter in the Vance family saga, hovered at the edges. My father was there, looking uncomfortable but present in a new suit that didn't quite fit him. My mother was there, directing the placement of the flower arrangements with the same intensity she had once brought to the charity galas. Chloe stood at the center, holding a microphone, looking nervous but determined. I stood at the back, watching. I had made it clear that this was not my event. I was a donor, nothing more. Chloe had asked me to speak, and I had declined. This was her moment, her chance to prove that she was more than the sum of her Instagram filters. The Grove Foundation is about building bridges, Chloe said, her voice carrying across the small crowd. Not the kind that connect two sides of a highway, but the kind that connect people to opportunity. We're going to use the resources and the visibility of Kira's Grove to support affordable housing, job training, and community programs in the neighborhoods that surround it. We're going to make sure that the people who have lived here for generations aren't priced out by the very park that was meant to serve them. She spoke with a passion I had never seen in her before. She talked about the small businesses that were being squeezed by rising rents, about the families who were being forced to move further and further from the city center, about the children who deserved a safe place to play and a stable place to live. She wasn't just reciting talking points. She was speaking from a place of genuine conviction. I saw my mother's face softened, a hint of pride in her eyes that I had never seen directed at Chloe before. I saw my father's posture a little straighter, as if he was finally standing for something that wasn't just about himself. After the ceremony, people mingled. Chloe was surrounded by well-wishers. My mother was talking animatedly with a representative from a local housing coalition, her hands moving in the same expressive gestures she used to describe the floral arrangements at a gala. My father stood off to the side, a little lost, until the construction foreman from the park's building project came up to him and started talking about a new affordable housing development. My father's face lit up. He was in his element, talking about concrete and steel, about permits and timelines. For the first time in a long time, he looked like a man who knew what he was doing. I was about to slip away when my mother appeared at my elbow. "You're leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "I have a meeting," I said. She looked at me, her eyes searching. "I was wrong," she said, the words coming out in a rush, as if she was afraid she wouldn't say them if she paused. "About the house. About the park. About you." She swallowed. "I thought I was building something. A legacy. A place in the world. But I was just building a cage. For myself. For your father. For all of you." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "Chloe is doing something real," she continued, her voice quiet. "Something that matters. And I'm proud of her. But I'm proud of you too. I've always been proud of you. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to see you." I looked at her, this woman who had spent her life curating an image, and I saw, for the first time, the woman underneath. A woman who was afraid, who had been taught that a woman's value was in what she could display, not what she could build. A woman who had made terrible mistakes, but who was, perhaps, trying to find her way out of them. "The foundation is a good start," I said. "For all of you." She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I know. And I'm going to do everything I can to make it work. For Chloe. For the park. She paused, her voice catching. For us." I didn't hug her. I wasn't ready for that. But I didn't walk away either. I stood there, in the park that had once been my home, with the woman who had sold it, and I let the silence be enough. "I have to go," I said, finally. "But I'll be at the first board meeting. As a donor. Not as a director." She nodded, understanding. "That's fair." I walked away, through the park, past the memorial garden, past the playground where children were now swinging and laughing. I didn't look back. But I didn't need to. For the first time, I felt like I was walking forward, not away. The first year of the Grove Foundation was a testament to what could be achieved when ego was set aside and purpose was embraced. My father, to everyone's surprise, turned out to be a gifted advocate for affordable housing. He knew the construction industry inside and out, and he used that knowledge to negotiate with developers, to identify underutilized properties, to cut through the red tape that had stalled so many projects. He was at every city council meeting, every planning commission hearing, his voice steady and his arguments sharp. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just doing the work. My mother, freed from the need to maintain a perfect facade, threw herself into the foundation's fundraising efforts with a zeal that surprised even me. She organized galas that were elegant but not ostentatious, luncheons that connected donors directly with the families who would benefit from their contributions. She talked about the park, about the neighborhoods, about the children who needed a safe place to live, with a sincerity that was completely new. She was no longer performing. She was, I realized, finally being. Chloe was the engine that drove it all. She worked 16-hour days, building relationships with community leaders, writing grant proposals, managing a small but dedicated staff. She was no longer the girl who posted for likes. She was a woman who was building something real, something that would outlast the fleeting attention of social media. And she was good at it. Very good. I watched from a distance, providing funding when it was needed, offering advice when it was asked for, but never stepping into the spotlight. The foundation was their redemption, not mine. I had already found mine. One evening, about a year after the foundation's launch, I was walking through Kira's Grove when I saw my father. He was sitting on the magnolia bench, a worn blueprint spread out on his lap. He didn't see me approach. He was staring at the sunken garden, at the wildflowers that now bloomed where his living room used to be. "Dad," I said. He looked up, startled. Then his face softened into a smile that was, for once, not a performance. "Kira." I was just thinking. I sat down on the bench beside him. "About what?" He gestured with the blueprint. "The next project. A mixed-use development, with retail on the ground floor and affordable units above. We're trying to get the city to approve the zoning variance." He paused. "It's hard work. Harder than anything I've ever done. But you're good at it," I said. He nodded slowly. "I am. I spent 30 years learning how to build things for people who already had everything. I'm finally using that knowledge for something that matters." He looked at me, his eyes holding mine. "I'm sorry, Kira. For the house. For not seeing you. For all of it." I looked out at the park, at the children playing on the new playground equipment, at the families picnicking on the grass. "I know," I said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, his voice rough. "I'm just telling you." We sat in silence for a long time, the sounds of the park filling the space between us. It was a comfortable silence, not the tense, charged silence of the past. It was the silence of two people who had finally stopped pretending. "I'm proud of you," I said, finally. "Of what you're doing with the foundation." He blinked, surprised. Then a smile, a real smile, spread across his face. "Thank you." I stood up. "I have to go. Meeting in the morning." He nodded, turning back to his blueprint. "I'll be at the Planning Commission hearing on Tuesday. You should come. See what we're building." I smiled. "Maybe I will." I walked away, through the park, past the memorial garden, past the spot where the magnolia tree used to stand. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was walking forward into a future that I had built on my own terms. And for the first time, I was walking with the knowledge that the people I had left behind were finding their own way, not back to me, but forward to something better. The second annual gala for the Grove Foundation was held in the newly renovated clubhouse of the Haven. It was a strange, full-circle moment. The club, once a bastion of the old guard, had been transformed under the new board I had helped install. The membership was younger, more diverse. The facilities were modern and welcoming. And the old ballroom, where my parents had once held court, was now filled with a different kind of crowd: activists, community leaders, the families who had benefited from the foundation's work, and the donors who were making it possible. I attended, not as a guest of honor, but as a guest. I wore a simple black dress, nothing like the emerald gown I had worn to the disastrous gala 2 years before. I stood at the back of the room, watching the scene unfold. My mother, in an elegant but understated gown, was working the room with a skill that was now deployed in service of something real. She introduced a young mother who had just moved into one of the foundation's new housing units to a potential donor, her hand on the woman's arm, her words genuine. My father was at the bar, but he was drinking soda water, and he was deep in conversation with a city councilor about the next phase of the housing project. Chloe was the center of it all. She gave the keynote speech, and she didn't talk about the park or the foundation. She talked about a family. Her family. She talked about a house on Maple Street that had been sold, and a park that had been built in its place. She talked about a father who had learned to build for people who had nothing, and a mother who had learned to see beyond the surface. She talked about a sister who had shown her that strength wasn't about being loud, but about being true. We don't get to choose our families, she said, her voice steady. But we do get to choose what we build with what we're given. My sister, Kira, was given a house that was taken away. And she built a park. My father was given a talent for construction, and he used it to build a monument to himself. Now he's using it to build homes for others. My mother was given a gift for creating beautiful things, and she used it to create a perfect image. Now she's using it to create a better future. She paused, her eyes scanning the room until they found me, standing at the back. We are all works in progress, she said. But sometimes, the most broken things can become the most beautiful. Kira's Grove isn't just a park. It's a reminder that we can always choose to build something new. The room erupted in applause. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching my sister, the girl who had once posted her life for likes, stand in front of a room full of people and tell the truth. She had found her voice. And she was using it to build something that mattered. After the speech, people came up to me. Some I knew, some I didn't. They thanked me for the park, for the foundation, for the work I had done. I accepted their thanks, but I deflected the praise. This wasn't my night. It was theirs. Finally, the crowd thinned. My mother was saying goodnight to the last of the donors. My father was helping the cleanup crew fold chairs. Chloe was sitting at a table near the stage, her feet up, a glass of champagne in her hand, looking exhausted but happy. I walked over and sat down beside her. That was a good speech, I said. She grinned. I stole some of your lines. I noticed. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the room empty out. They're different now, she said, gesturing towards our parents. Happier, I think. In a way they never were before. Maybe they just stopped trying to be someone they weren't, I said. She nodded. And what about you? Are you happy? I thought about it. I thought about the park, the foundation, the business I had built, the life I had created. I thought about the little girl who had climbed the magnolia tree and the woman she had become. I'm content, I said. Which is better than happy. Happiness comes and goes. Contentment lasts. She looked at me, her eyes soft. I'm glad you gave me that chance. That job. I don't know if I would have found my way without it. You would have, I said. You just might have taken a little longer. We stood up together, walking towards the exit. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. The lights of Kira's Grove were visible in the distance, a soft glow against the dark sky. You coming to the park tomorrow? Chloe asked. We're planting the new garden. Mom is bringing the orchids. I smiled. I'll be there. She hugged me, a quick, fierce hug, and then she was gone, walking towards our parents, who were waiting for her by the car. I watched them for a moment, the three of them, a family that had been broken and was slowly, painstakingly, being rebuilt. Then I turned and walked towards my own car, towards my own life. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had built my own legacy, not from their approval, but from their dismissal. I had taken the ruins of my childhood and turned them into a park that belonged to everyone. I had watched my family fall, and I had watched them rise again, not as the people they had pretended to be, but as the people they were becoming. And I had learned, finally, that the greatest victory wasn't in the fall. It was in the rebuilding.